Hey everybody, welcome to the Governance Working Group meeting number 21, although that's debatable since number 20 didn't happen, but we can get into that in a little bit. Today is Thursday, August 6th, and it's just a little past noon Eastern time. How does everyone feel about the new time for this meeting? I'm hoping folks are more awake. I am, which is great. Yeah. Okay, rave reviews of the new time. Awesome. Okay, so today's meeting is going to be a little different from the ones that we've had previously, just based on the retro call that we had a couple of weeks ago, in which we discussed possibly, well, not possibly, in which we discussed developing a grant proposal to fund and support this working group moving forward. And I think it's, as Brittany said, it's going to be a great way to test out the grant.io platform that the Stacks Foundation is coming out with. So I've got an agenda here that is specifically catered to that, although I know there are some outstanding issues that we still have to address. So that is actually the first action item here, is just asking ourselves, what outstanding work do we still have to complete, and can any of that work be accommodated by the governance working group grant proposal that we are going to start working on today. So the person I'm going to call out for that, for any initial opinions, is Jason. Jason, I know you've done a ton of work in this area, just making sure our standard operating procedures are amazing and seamless. I know there are a bunch of open issues. I'm wondering if of those issues there's anything that is, very much outstanding that lies outside the scope of the grant proposal that we should address now.
Sure. So I was just dropping a few links into the chat for everybody for today's agenda, our previous agenda for what would have been meeting 20, and then where we keep the resources for the past meetings and everything else. And probably the biggest question I had is, if we really like this structure of how we track the meetings and we update the tables, just how should we fit everything back in, considering the retro meeting and sort of our restructuring here a bit. And I think the easiest way to do that would be to call the last meeting, meeting number 20, call this one number 21, and just keep moving. Simple is always best unless we have any major objections to that. But in doing that, I was curious, we had this sort of rolling agenda of action items and discussion items that we would do per meeting. So back in the project management repository issue number 72, there were quite a few things we were talking about at the times. Like, we were still going over what some of the board nominations, community board seat, bylaws, those kind of things. And we were finishing up the survey, which we had a follow-up with survey respondents that I don't think has happened yet. That would probably be one we can definitely talk about. And then we've got this landing page that we've developed so that all the resources on GitHub are now displayed online, just at a github.io domain through GitHub Pages. So that was the main parts of it, and the rest was pretty much discussion. But I was more curious of the meta conversation of how everyone feels like we should carry these issues. Like, should we continue to carry them from meeting to meeting? Did we like that system? Is there anything we want to change about it before I go and add anything to, let's say, like the agenda for the next meeting or something like that? So I'll give a few seconds for feedback on that.
I had a comment on this. I think this came up in the retro meeting, but this idea of different work streams. So it seems like these issues pretty much that span all of our governance issues, or in all of our governance interests, and perhaps like a model of having work streams on which we report on more on like a semi-monthly basis or asynchronously might be more effective and productive. So I don't know exactly how we would be categorizing those different work streams, but things like what Harold is working on, for example, would be one specific work stream, and things like the board nominations would correspond to a work stream specifically around Stacks Foundation governance, and some of the more administrative things around like standard operating procedures would be part of a work stream on how the governance working group works. So I don't know what folks think about that.
I definitely think that's a good point. And I dropped a link over to the original form that we set up when we were talking about these type of meetings. And some of the questions that I wanted to ask everybody were, what type of meeting should we have? You know, like we've had a really cool action session where we all sat here and we spent the time working together. We proposed the idea for a discussion type session where it's like, hey, we have a really in-depth concept and we want to explain it to everybody. And same with the town hall and the other meeting types. So in that way, I think what I would recommend is we really have two options. Like we can continue carrying the issues from agenda to agenda to agenda, which I don't see any issue with, or we could move some of those longer form discussion type items or even the action items into a living document in the repository. So it would be, that would actually make it available on the website versus only in the issues. And it would give us some ways to say like, hey, we have these topics, we want to schedule a meeting around this topic, and we can address them via those separate work streams. So I'm seeing a little bit of feedback in the chat. We have Juliet and Harold agreeing to rolling things within the issues. So with that sort of new idea that I proposed there, would anybody prefer to do it in a living document that could live on the website? Versus just carrying it over in each agenda issue? Or do you still feel strongly that these should flow with the agenda? And again, I'll pause.
Maybe perhaps a compromise. I like the idea of having a living document just because I like seeing the live collaboration between folks in the document, but maybe if it's carried, if updates are carried from issue to issue as like a section, so like update on a work stream section in each issue, that could also take care of like Juliet's point about it keeping agenda items top of mind for her. Does that make sense? It made sense in my head when I was thinking about it.
Yeah,
It does. Go Philip.
Yeah, good day. Something wrong. I think that the most important aspect is to try to advance in our I say objectives, and that's why and what I notice is that we are trying to bring to in a written form some principles that are inherent in this community. And that's something that has been captured by the survey or and also the certain documents. And so at least, you know, those things we should try to collect it in a way that it has a certain order. And so in order to really have the consensus that is what we're talking about. But there's certain things that we already have. So then that's something that, as you were mentioning, Jason, that also is like a living document. But maybe we can concentrate it in just one topic because it's quite broad, you know, to have a very huge document and also to have that all. So maybe by a document by certain very important topics could be different documents for the different important topics, and that's a way to solve it because we have to decide which are the values that we are considering, which are the principles, and those are the things, and of course is when you have like a kind of a source of knowledge, as for example the revelation of that comes from the religions, you know, is the prophet that gives you the revelation, you see, and then you have to write that, you know, so that you have the Bible, you have the Quran, you have the Bible from the Jews, and you have the you know, the traditional indigenous as a knowledge that then you ask, you talk with about that, and you have that correlation. Then you put it together and all that, and then you have all that as a source of knowledge. But in terms of the science is based on and trying to understand what's going on in the universe and the nature, and then to try to define certain principles, and those principles, they come up with the knowledge of science. But in terms of this is a mix of business, social, scientific, it's a mix of and principles. You see that also there's spiritual principles that are around. So at least, you know, that probably that and the people really, when they come in, and yesterday, and I saw 2 testimonies saying that they see some principles that are in the Blockstack community that they value. And so then those are the things that we have to capture. And you have done, you know, Lane has done a good way to capture that, and Jason has made that also. So let's see which of the topics are quite very important, then we can try to work on it. And
Yeah, Philip.
sorry about the long inspiration.
Sorry, I think on that note, so on the note of work streams, I guess like if we're thinking about this from the point of view of a new governance working group member, it would be very clear to them, and I think maybe this is like Juliet's concern as well. If you're a new member and you're looking at an issue for an upcoming meeting, you're wondering what the group is working on and what their progress is. So if there's a section that lays out the different work streams and it's very clear what you could be working on as a member of the governance working group, that could solve our issue of like, you know, what's going on. So if you're someone who cares about the Stacks Foundation, maybe that's a work stream that you'd like to plug into. If you're someone who's interested in like helping the governance group operate, that's a work stream that you could plug into. Obviously you could be a full work streams, but perhaps that's a way for us to sort of, you know, advertise the work that we're doing a little better. So yeah, I agree with Philip in just making that clearer to folks. Although I do think we do that now in a way, so.
Sure, and I definitely want to say thank you, Philip. I think what you're saying is right on par, right? Like as we're starting to amass more information, more data, more action items, discussion items, all of this stuff, we're starting to see different categories or tags or ways that we can organize the information. So thinking of it that way, I could see definitely, you know, keeping everything heavily linked, but to take advantage of ways to organize the information now that we have it. And I definitely have some ideas for that too. So I'm happy to take those and kind of either propose them in an issue or sort of, actually I'll probably just open it in a PR so people can look at it. And if we like it and we get enough people to agree on it, then we can merge it in. But more so it sounds like we're all on the same page, that as long as we have top of mind awareness and a decent amount of organization, that the content itself can sort of move in a new direction. So I will task myself with that one. And on that note, is there any other details related to this topic of like past meeting or agenda items or the way things move that anybody else would like to cover?
Yeah, actually, one thing I clarify, I would like to have clarified by the group, just based on the conversations we've had about making these meetings more geared toward working together. Are we going to adopt a format of there being, you know, written updates every week on each of these work streams, but we don't necessarily talk about every single one of those work streams during the meeting? Like maybe each meeting has 1 or 2 main focuses, or people are just hopping on to work collaboratively, but we don't necessarily have to go through the whole agenda. Yeah, so I wasn't sure what we had decided on there as a question. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah, it sounds good to me. The 1 or 2, I don't know, issues that take priority for the meeting, and then some type of asynchronous write-ups sounds like it would be the most time efficient, at least, because I know just from a couple of those meetings where we, you know, walked through each topic and, you know, took time to address the action item together during the meeting, it can be pretty timely or you know, may feel rushed. So the asynchronous makes sense. Right. But then also I did enjoy the meetings where we did, you know, come together to address action items.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's someone had suggested that we sort of alternate between the two formats as well. So if that's a possibility. But yeah, thank you, Harold, for clarifying. Okay, so are there any other thoughts on this agenda item about outstanding work and how we want to organize, or can we move forward? Cool, sounds great. Okay, so we are gonna dive right into this grant proposal. Brittany, actually, would you like to give a quick update on where we are with grant.io? You don't have to give now if you are prepared for it, but I thought maybe give some context could be helpful for this recap.
Sure. Yeah. So Grant.io built out a platform for us. So it's an open source platform. It allows basically the application process to be a little easier. So like you would sign up for the platform, you would submit an application. That application could then get comments from the community, from people on reviewing the application. You can get approved that way. So it basically helps just create a workflow for all of those steps. And then on the the foundation side, it allows us to kind of move things into either approved or accepted or rejected or passed. So that tool is actually now built. So both myself and Ryan have just like demo accounts, and our goal is to kind of just go through and test it and make sure that it's working on the admin side, and then being able to open it up to folks who are interested and maybe, who are already active members of our community, but in applying for a grant could actually be kind of testers and actually go through the process and fill out their application. So that would be a real application, but it just may take, there may be some bugs in the code. We just want to make sure that it like moves as seamlessly as possible. And then the goal would be probably by the end of August, we would actually announce the grants program to the broader community. But we would want to start with having a few of the people who are already interested, have already been thinking about doing work on this, have their grants already, proposals already live in the system before that. So I think the governance working group would be great, because we talked about applying for a grant. You could also help give feedback on the process. Is it confusing? Are there too many steps? Like, did it work all right? And so that kind of beta testing would be great. Just then we can have a more seamless experience, and also we can start actually approving grants and getting those jump started by the end of August. So that's an update there. So I don't know if anyone has questions. I did see all the feedback on the GitHub post, if you haven't seen it yet, of kind of the template that we would recommend for applications. So the types of questions that would need to be answered in those applications. I think one of the missing pieces working on the background as well is just around what the contract looks like and what are the requirements for actually paying out the money, since we will be paying it out in US dollars to begin with. Like who's gonna sign the contract if there's multiple people on an application? What does that contract entail? Just making it very clear so there's no ambiguity around like, are there tax implications or jurisdiction restrictions, things like that.
Cool, thank you for that update, Brittany. Any questions from anyone on grant.io?
I'm just curious about, so Brittany, thank you for introducing that. That's really helpful background. You said it's an open source platform, which is great. I had asked this in the GitHub issue, so you may be preempting my question, but like the review process itself, it sounds like there's kind of a backend and an admin thing. It sounds like that's probably not like super open or transparent, but I'm wondering how much sort of transparency there is to that process, how much transparency we/the foundation want to bring to that process, and what that might look like.
Yeah, I think the goal would be to deliver all feedback to applicants on their public application page. So, if there's like missing or incomplete information, being able to really relay that in this public manner. So on the back end, it's just more of a administrative tool so that like we can kind of change the status of people. So not everyone would have that authority. Like you would have to be an admin to be able to, change status. But in terms of the commenting and feedback, that could all happen through, in the public domain. And I think that would be important to, state like either why, why there needs to be more information or what we see as missing, or maybe it needs to be rescoped or more clarity on milestones, or if it's approved, what like that entails as well. So yeah, I think, trying to make it as transparent as possible, and then just using the tool as a way to kind of manage the workflow instead of like a Google Sheet or something. And maybe that answers your question, or maybe there's a missing component that we should consider too.
I think on a similar note for me, there are some questions around the grants committee. Maybe I missed this in a previous update, but who is on that committee and whether there are opportunities for, I know it says here, issue that we could open this up to the community board for feedback and approval. So I guess for like this first iteration, is there an MVP version of the grants committee, but eventually it would evolve to include choices from the community or nominations from the community in the way that we've done with the Sachs Foundation board?
Yeah. And I think the nice thing is with a committee is I think it can be potentially more loosely structured. Initially, the decision-making will probably be, as MVP, just with the foundation. So Jude, myself, and then Ryan, who joined our team. So we will be looking through. Now, I think where the community can be a big help is being able, if we're able to tap experts who maybe have a specific expertise around what the grant is asking for. So if someone is applying for, the governance working group grant, and if we didn't have as much knowledge, we would tap into this group and be like, hey, can you guys comment? Do you have any feedback or questions for this particular applicant? So I think initially it would be informal. And then I think as we test the process, I'm sure we will recognize that there's definitely gaps in like our knowledge set. So we want to potentially either formally have a committee and then figure out like what that decision making looks like. Is it ultimately the foundation's decision? Like myself, Jude,
I'm losing audio on my side. I'm not sure if that's just me.
It more of an some questions that probably initial. Sorry, can you guys hear me?
I can now. I was also, but it's fine now.
Sorry, yeah, Wi-Fi. Yeah, so I think the goal would be to make sure that we can deliver on the process first with just the very small group, and then be able to improve it over time and kind of answer some of those questions of how does the committee look? What authority do they have? How big is it? How do people get on that committee? And I think it's definitely separate though from something like the board, which is more of a formal legal constraint, which we need. We have a lot of governance already set up for it, but this would need its own governance.
My concern is how these principles of ecosystems will be applied. So then probably that will be something that we have to put a way of a kind of evaluation of how that adds to or encourages the ecosystem to be formed. As we have learned, it's not only the technical aspects that we're talking about it, but it's also the how that will create a base for the ecosystem. And so that's something that is very important. And so then the people that have to participate in the evaluation has to have this vision of what we are trying to do is the governance and what we want to capture, those values and principles that we want that to be inherent in this Blockstack ecosystem, so the Stacks ecosystem. So that's something that we had to see how we evolve in that, because people that probably are very technical, able, and maybe they have some they don't think about which are they don't know much about the principles of based in Blockstack community. So those are, it's quite challenging, and so probably your MVP approach is not bad, but it maybe has a bit broader than that, those members.
I think what could be helpful with this is I could start, I'd be happy to do this, start, because I used to be a teacher and I've done a lot of assessments, like taking those ecosystem values and creating a rubric that could be used across projects. And that'd be something that would be valuable in assessing any of the grant proposals, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And my sense is that that kind of document will probably grow and evolve over time the more that we learn about our ecosystem. And actually, not to get too off topic here, but I do think it's related. Dan and I were talking about just these early stages of decision making, and it's it's wonderful that we have the Stacks Foundation here to take the lead, and we have ourselves, this governance working group, to take the lead on a lot of these decisions. But the reality is that we have a community of thousands of people, and it's difficult to know like exactly what everybody wants. And at these stages, there's an MVP version of governance that we're operating off of. So I think that the term that we coined, or the phrase that we coined, is minimum valuable governance, or MVG, and setting sort of milestones for ourselves in the evolution of governance is important, right? So whatever the governance working group decides to tackle between now and the end of the year in this proposal will be a reflection of like the MVP version of governance that we have now. But the more decisions we make and the more people we have on board, the more sophisticated that our governance model should be. So we should probably set goals like by the end of the year we should have a grants committee in place that is representative of the different entity ecosystem. So right now we're making some decisions informally, and we're doing our best to get feedback from the community, but it's definitely the case that we're not capturing what everybody wants, because that's kind of impossible. But yeah, I think it's important that we capture that in the grant proposal as well, just like the planting the seeds of governance, and also planning for like the long term, or the longevity of governance, so that it can mature with the ecosystem. So like something like Ryan's suggestion about the stock, collating all those values is important for evaluating projects, but that will definitely change the more that we learn about our ecosystem and the more that different entities grow in the ecosystem as well. Any other comments or questions there on just like the purpose of this grant or this proposal? Okay, great. Thank you everybody for those comments. So thank you, Brittany, for that update. Just like very quick summary based on the discussion we had during the retro. It seems like one of the challenges that we were encountering as a governance working group was basically, where to invest our time efforts. We all have slightly different interests in governance for the Stacks ecosystem, but ultimately our main goal is to serve the community, and that involves solving the most pressing issues that are blocking community members from achieving our ecosystem-wide goal of building a user-owned internet. And so I started a doc, I'm going to share this here, of potential goals and work streams that we as the governance working group could tackle in the next 3 to 6 months or so. One of the reasons for doing this is number one, to be public and transparent about the work that we're doing with the wider community, right? We've had this core group of people who've been tackling governance for the last few months, which has been great, and we've been able to give community some visibility into the work that we're doing by applying for a grant with this proposal. That's like the ultimate way of showing the community, hey, these are the things that we're working on now, and this is what we want to get both, financial and social support on. Do you have any feedback? Are there any issues that are more pressing that we're not tackling? But this grant proposal would also take into account things that we as community members know have been an issue for a long time, things like Radix. And yeah, I see Dan's point here about developing a proposal for how this group would evolve to allow wider community participation. That's a huge issue, right? Like it's still unclear what the Stacks community has authority over in terms of decision making. So that's a potential work stream that we could tackle. I've seen app mining come up in discussions a lot. So maybe we as the governance working group wouldn't be responsible for developing the full-blown app mining proposal, but we would be responsible for maybe starting a subcommittee that's focused on researching and developing an app mining draft. So this is a way to serve the community and address its most pressing needs in the next 3 to 6 months, and to also build credibility for the governance working group as a group that is truly reflective of the community's interests and the community's projects and needs. So if you haven't gotten a chance to go into that doc, please go in there. It's totally at a brainstorming sort of phase now. I'm not sure how we want to tackle like voting on the work streams that we want to include in this proposal. Based on what I know about this group, I feel like we're going to be pretty ambitious with what we want to achieve, but I think that's a good thing. Is everyone clear on why we want to submit this proposal and what the purpose of it is?
Well, from my end, it seems pretty clear. I'm excited to get things off the ground that the community's been excited about on the different fronts, collections being in addition to those things that you mentioned. So it'd be interesting to see how this can help these different fronts. Thank you kindly for this.
Jenny, just a quick question. Is this something that you see turning into a single individual grant proposal on behalf of the governance working group, or do you think it's something that hypothetically some subset of people, could take one or two of these things that they're especially excited about, and it could kind of turn into like multiple proposals? Just curious.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. This question has been asked, and it's been like tricky to wrap my head around, because again, like this core group of people has been consistently working on the governance working group issues in general, but I think it's very clear that some of us have different interests. So we're working on this together, but some of us have like different backgrounds, expertise. There are things that we could do. There are things that I could work on and do a better job than others. And so I don't know what everyone else thinks. Like, I was thinking that maybe this group would be taking the lead on writing the proposal and sort of laying out all these work streams. But once this grant proposal is accepted, it should be inviting to other community members to plug in where they think they can fit in, right? To get in where they fit in, right? So if one of the work streams that we as a governance group are committing to starting is app mining, maybe someone like Dan or Juliet, who have been experienced with app mining before, would volunteer to take the lead on just starting a subcommittee focused on developing an app mining proposal, and would then set a date for themselves, and then would have updates that they would share asynchronously with us throughout the governance working group's time. But yeah, I imagine this proposal giving this group like the ability to plant seeds for community projects, and those projects sort of spinning out into other smaller groups, like you mentioned, Lane, of people who are passionate about like very singular focuses.
So Jenny, are we going to have a one specific, is this one grant covering all these workflows? Is that how you envision this? Because I'm having a little bit difficulty understanding how this is going to work, or individual grants for each of these work streams. Can you
Yeah.
explain a little more?
Mhm. Yeah, I would sort of pose that to the group to decide what would be best. I always thought that I didn't think that we would tackle all of these work streams in this one proposal. I figured it would be a matter of prioritization, so figuring out amongst ourselves which of these are the most pressing, and we could do that more methodically as well, right? So we could survey community members, so we could pick our top 5 and say like, hey, these are issues we've seen blocking community members from doing the work that they want to do, and we would like to help tackle these in the next 3 to 6 months. What are your top issues? What would you like the governance working group to take the lead on? So that's where my thinking was with that. And as far as what we commit to, I think that is also up for the group to decide. So I was modeling this after the proposal that I'd seen for Cosmos, and I think their deliverables were a lot less, they were a lot more basic, right? Their deliverables were like, in the next 3 months, we're going to start a blog series. We're going to establish like updates, so we're going to have these working calls, and we want funding from the community to support us in doing that. Whereas, for us, we're taking that model, but we're addressing very pressing issues within the community. Does that make sense, Juliet? Does that clarify things a little more?
Yes, it does clarify. And I remember looking at the Cosmos proposal, and also being happy that we definitely accomplished most of the stuff that they had set out in their proposal. So this is
without funding.
Yeah. Thank you.
No problem. Just a quick point
We
here
have those
too.
lines. Sorry.
Yeah. So just this final point, this grant, we would be asking for funding. I don't necessarily know what the funding would be for. Again, like that's up to the group to decide, right? I would assume that if we were to apply for a small grant of like $1,000 or so, some of that money would go toward a bounty that we would want to oversee for Radix, right? Or I think it's perfectly reasonable to want to use some of that money to fund meetings where we're having like coffee with each other. I know Juliet brought this up, and I totally agree. If we're working together and spending so many hours on this, it's nice to have virtual meets where everyone has coffee or donuts, and it's a good way to connect with the community. So that funding could go toward that as well. But bounties, meetings, anything else that we want to support, I think that's what the grant would take.
Can I?
Well, I see from that list, of course, the many of this they have to be executed parallelly. So because those are, we all need those lines of work. So probably it's something that would be general. We could be general, and then the other ones are more specific, like in terms of development and also some. In relation with research and development. It could be something that's to work with Nike also, as Dan is mentioning. But essentially both, all of them, we have to see a way that we can advance it. And so I don't see if one of those could be left out or left behind.
Is anyone else losing audio?
A little bit. Can I say something? Can you all hear me? Yeah. I was just going to say, I was asking just to make sure I understood. The list that we're looking at now from Jenny in the document is just a starting point for potential areas that we could focus on with this grant proposal, right? So the grant proposal is a small thing to kind of just start building that muscle, start understanding the process, start working through kinks. It's not necessarily something that's going to, we're not planning to fix everything in this one shot. So my understanding is we're gonna like pick one thing to focus on out of this list, find something or 2 or 3 things to focus on this list, put a grant proposal together to focus on those. These other items that may not make that initial cut would be things that we could stick on a backlog and potentially work through later. Is that how I understand you, Jenny?
Yeah, like areas of future research, like the white paper does. I think, I guess one thing I should add is the way that you've often structured your questions and thought about your questions is really helpful, Jan. So, when we throw something like Radix on there, it's very obvious to us why that's important. But thinking along the lines of why that's important for the community and framing it in a governance sort of way, right? So why do we want to tackle Radix? Well, because it's blocking so many community members on building this, and if they can't build this, then they can't continue to contribute to our mission of building user-owned internet and so on and so forth. So just thinking about these work streams as things that contribute to just community participation or augment community participation. If they're blocking community members, I feel like that's a governance issue, right? Like naturally, that's something that this group would want to tackle. And we would have to articulate that in the proposal, which I think is going to be the hard part, but will also be a really good exercise for us as well.
I agree with the strategy.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I'm glad we're all receptive. This is really exciting. Okay, so I've shared this doc with these potential deliverables. Now I'm just sort of wondering how we want to move forward. I can see an action item just being everybody contributing more ideas to these work streams, eventually voting on our top ideas, and then this was ambitious, but I threw in here that we could start an outline for the grant. I think that's probably an action item for later, given that Brittany shared the grant guidelines recently. But okay, so after we all share our ideas or brainstorm our ideas for grant commitments or potential work streams, how would we want to go about prioritizing them? Do we want to go the methodical route that we discussed with like surveying community members to make sure that these work streams need their most pressing work streams? Or do we want to sort of just decide for ourselves and put the grant out there, write the grant first, and then ask for feedback? I think that there are a couple of ways we could go about this.
What's the timeline? I heard end of August for starting to test the process. Is that right? So we really only have a couple of weeks?
Yeah. Yeah, as usual, as soon as possible is always best. I think, so Brittany mentioned that we would be announcing the Grant.io platform at the end of August. I mean, number one, I think it's important that we take our time with something as important as this, but number two, I think that we could probably develop this in the next 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. I'm happy to take the lead on like writing the grant. I know that that's the most time-consuming thing, but I think what is important before we even start writing it is just getting those ideas down and getting some sort of signal from community members that what we think are pressing issues are actually pressing issues for the community. Does 2 to 3 weeks sound reasonable for everyone?
For the Kickstart, I think this is possible to decide which are the topics that we want to encourage or prioritize. I think this it can be done. I think, of course, we have to work. But.
All right, Philip, you and I can split half and half. No, I'm joking. Okay, so Brittany, just to clarify, if we were to write a draft in the next couple of weeks, we would then be able to, submit a draft to Grant.io for feedback from the community by August 27th. Was that the date that you'd mentioned?
Yeah, so that that week is when we would announce it. So even possibly, if things work out, like it would be able to be posted before sort of that announcement launch date. And then we could just circulate it internally, try out the tool, and people could get feedback. But yeah, if you could, the week of the 27th, if the application is all done, I think that'd be great, because we plan to announce it with more press, and maybe there would be more eyeballs, more feedback and everything on it by then as well.
That's a good point. Okay. Okay, so August 27th is our deadline. Or that week is our deadline. That's good to know. It feels like when I was writing my dissertation. Although I wrote that in 3 days, not 2 weeks. So this is that.
We had to do it because its time is running out. So we have to do it as possible. It won't be perfect, but we have to do it.
All right, great. Okay, so as an action item, do we all agree that an action item that makes sense is for everyone to hop into that Gov Grant proposal doc I shared and to share ideas for work streams? That's a reasonable action item. And then, were there any opinions on whether we should share these ideas with the community and ask them what their top priorities are, or should we decide amongst ourselves, write the proposal, and have the community give feedback at that stage? The former will obviously hold us up a little bit. The latter runs the risk of us getting it completely wrong.
I would like to ask Lane if you remember something from the survey that give us some feedback on this. At least the principles. Because that's something that we can say that is come from the survey, and if it's not. Because we cannot be all the time, doing feedback and asking for feedback, but we have to do something that will be in action and then have the feedback. But it's because it's too much analysis, and then we don't advance, and that's my thing. But in terms of the survey, can help us on that. I don't know. It's just.
Yeah, Philip, I'm with you. My 2 cents on this would be, what is that great phrase? Ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Great. So it sounds like we are leaning toward the latter.
Again, this is, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I want to make sure I do understand. This is, again, more for testing out the process. And while we want to accomplish something, that's not the primary goal here. So I think picking a couple of things and moving forward is, in my opinion, fine, because we know we're not going to get to everything, and everything on this list. We know the list will grow, and we want to kind of work through the process first, primarily, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And we can be strategic in picking the things that we think we could really knock out of the park, right? Because part of this is building credibility for this process, and is building credibility for the governance working group amongst community members. If the governance working group is meant to be representative of this wider community of thousands of people, I think it's important to demonstrate that we can deliver. So that's a good point, Dan. Just like picking the things that we think we can tackle best. So. Okay, sounds like a decision.
Yeah, I'm agreeing here. I'm not, I just wanted to add to what Dan said just now. Like, I think the people in this group have enough of a handle on what's going on throughout the ecosystem that if the task at hand is like, pick 2 things, that are realistic grant applications that will add value to the community, like, I think that we should have no trouble doing that. And as the list grows, of course, we want there to be more, like, touch points and more ways for community members to come in and make other proposals. But as far as bootstrapping the process, I have a high degree of confidence in this group.
Totally. Yes. This group is great. All right. Okay. So we've got our action items established. We're ready. We have a deadline in place, and we're all really excited to start this process. So is there anything I'm missing beyond those things? Awesome. Okay. Thanks, everybody. This was great.
Well, nice seeing you again in this working group. I got lost some weeks ago, and sorry about that. But I'm glad I'm back.
We are too. All right. Well, I guess so. We will reconvene and check out this list of ideas next Thursday, same time. See you all later.
See you.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Everybody have a
Bye,
good week.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheerio.